Hello and welcome back to Brawler Bios. I'm your host, Brian, also known as Malorian, and this here is the podcast brought to you by the great folks there of Line of Sight, that it's a Warmachine podcast, but it's all about Brawlmachine. It's all about that smaller format, 25 points, and even more specifically, the casters and how they're going to do at these points. Every single episode, we're going to be taking one of those casters, really breaking down what the rules are, what type of list it can go into, and then starting to the best part of all, which is kind of like grading it based on its ability to have answers, questions, its personal output, being used by new players, and then experienced players. Now, for this one here, we're on episode 5, and we're now going to be going over to Circle Oberos, and we're going to be talking about Tanith the Feral Song. So, Tanith the Feral Song is a circle black-clad warlock. It has 6 Fury, Speed 6, Strength 5, Mat 6, Rat 6, Defense 15, Armor 15, Command 9. So far, all those stats pretty nice and average. It's going to be having 15 health boxes, 31 War Beast points, so that's pretty nice. Otherwise, it has Pathfinder, like, a lot of circle things do, and then it's going to have 2 weapons. The first one on the card there is going to be Jaws of the Earth. Now, Jaws of the Earth is its ranged weapon, and it's going to be range 12, POW 14, magical weapon, but this thing actually has some interesting rules on it, which what it does is, first of all, it has from beneath. So whenever you're shooting with this kind of like obvious little jaws that's coming from down below, it's going to be ignoring cover and concealment. So, okay, that's pretty nice. The other nice thing it has too is Blood Boon. So once per activation, immediately after resolving an attack in which it destroyed an enemy model with this weapon, this model can cast a spell of cost 3 or less without spending Fury. Now, this is a very interesting rule to have because normally when you see this, it's on a melee weapon. It's something where it's forcing you to get in there, be aggressive with your caster, cut something down, and then cast a spell. But for her, she gets to just shoot things with her nice little Jaws of the Earth weapon and kill things off that way. Now, we're not even done there yet with the gun. The next thing it's going to be having on top of that is Roots of the Shadow. Now, what this rule means is that on a direct hit against an enemy model, center a 4-inch AoE on the model hit. Enemy models in the AoE suffer Shadow Bind for 1 round. And for those who don't know, a model suffering Shadow Bind suffers -3 defense, and for 1 round, when it advances, it cannot move except for changing its facing. This can also be shaken. So we've only just begun. We haven't even gotten into the spells, and this is such a powerful gun to be having on this caster. The idea that we can just sneak around and then shoot this thing from 12 away, and it's not like a boring little hand cannon that you might see somewhere else. No, this is going to be the Jaws coming up from the earth, killing a model, putting down an AoE, doing Shadow Bind, getting a free spell. Like, this alone is a very interesting way to start a caster. And so I guess I shouldn't be gushing about this so early, but it's a very neat thing to have for sure. Now, it does have another weapon, like I said, which is its melee weapon, and that's going to be the Staff of Fate. This is going to be a range 2 P+S 11 magical weapon. Really nothing too fancy, although it does have one extra rule on it, which is critical Shadow Bind. So basically just that same rule we just talked about above. However, this one actually has to be on a critical hit. So this is not what Tanith wants to do, obviously. I mean, with the other one, what you want to do is either find like a clump of infantry, shoot and kill one, Shadow Bind the rest so that they can't really be doing much. Or if you catch like an infantry model by a heavy, okay, kill the infantry model. And now, even though that heavy could shake the effect later, well, it's going to be minus defense and it's going to have to spend resources in order to shake it. So just because something can be shaken doesn't mean it's bad. I would rather have it so that, hey, this thing can be shaken as opposed to be needing a critical effect. So really, really nice. Alright, otherwise she does have a couple of other rules. The first one is going to be Prowl. which says, while this model has concealment, it gains stealth. So why not? This is a great way to keep your caster safe, especially if you're new to the game. One of the biggest things that people forget is that this is not cover, right? If you get cover, great, you have +4 defense, but you only get that stealth if you have concealment. So think about that. You got to be in forest or cloud or something like that. Now, she also has Dark Power. Now, what Dark Power says is this model gains an additional die on magic attack and magic attack damage rolls, and then you discard the lowest die in each roll. So what we're really seeing here is that no, Tanith is not, I'm going to go and attack you with my big fancy staff type of warlock. No, Tanith is, I'm going to be casting little magical spells so that the jaws are coming up from the ground and trapping you and eating you and killing you, and I'm going to be hitting you with spells. And so with that, then let's move on to that, which is, what spells does Tanith actually have? So she has quite a few, and they're actually pretty good. The first one here is going to be Admonition. It's a cost 2, range 6 upkeep spell, and what that really says is when an enemy model advances and ends its movement within 6 inches of a target model in the spellcaster's battle group, the affected model can immediately advance up to 3 inches, and then Admonition expires. The affected model cannot be targeted by free strikes during this movement. Fantastic, fantastic spell to have, especially in these smaller games where you don't have a lot of models actually out there. So if their last heavy is trying to go after your heavy and you have Admonition, yeah, good luck. It's just never going to happen. You're always going to dance away and then be able to charge back in later. So really, really great rule to have. Now, the next one here is going to be Affliction, which is another good rule. Now, what it says is that it's going to be another cost 2, range 8 upkeep, and what this one does is target model or unit suffers -2 defense, and when a damage roll resulting from a direct hit fails to exceed the armor of an affected model, the model suffers 1 damage point. So this is not only an answer to whatever defense you might be seeing out there, but this is just going to be an answer to armor as well, right? As long as you can plink 1 damage in there, it is going through. So obviously, we're going to be talking about the list later, but anything that can be putting out lots of attacks loves this, because if you have 20 shots, that means 20 damage, and that can be a really hard thing to be dealing with. The next one that's on here is going to be Bleed. This is going to be a cost 2, range 8, POW 10, and what it says is when Bleed damages a living enemy model, this model removes D3 damage points. Now, the big thing to think about here is that this is not going to be the spell that is going to be really the, I'm going to be doing this to heal myself. It's on the rules there, and if it happens, that's nice, but this is probably going to be the main thing that Tanith might be using to try and like magical bolt things down. Again, remember that she's going to get that extra dice to hit and for damage, dropping the lowest. And so anything like this where you can be doing this sort of like magical bolts type of attack is fantastic. We're going to see that this is going to really go along with her feat as well. She is going to have more spells though. She also has Rift, which is a cost 3, range 8, AoE 4, POW 13, last the round, and what this thing does is it's an AoE. The AoE is rough terrain and remains in play for 1 round. So not only can you use this as a straight up damage spell, or just lobbing it into groups of infantry that have high defense or low armor, but also that rough terrain stays there. So whereas a lot of circle things usually have Pathfinder and doesn't care if the ground is going to be rough terrain, doing this to an opponent can be crippling, making it so that you put these rifts in front of them and now all of a sudden they can't really get to you. I mean, really, think of it this way. If they have to go half speed through this 4-inch AoE, you basically reduce their threat by 4 inches. And that's massive, absolutely massive. Won't always come up, but when it does, like I said, a really huge effect. Now, the last spell on here is going to finish things up with Scything Touch. It's a cost 2, range 6 upkeep, and it says target friendly faction model gains Dark Shroud. Now, what Dark Shroud is that while in the melee range of a model with Dark Shroud, enemy models are -2 armor. So you're starting to see in here that she has a lot of answers to a lot of things. She has several things that are dealing with defense and several things that are dealing with armor. So you can already tell that when we get to the grading later that this is going to be a pretty good area. But yeah, I mean, just saying about these spells here, a really, really great spell list for a starter box caster for sure. All right, finally, we have to get to her feat, which is Rites of the Worm. Now, what this does is, while war beasts in Tanith's battle group are in her control range, she can channel spells through them. So great, all your war beasts just become arc nodes, which is really nice to have when you are a caster with a whole bunch of spells that are only range 8. Additionally, when Tanith or a war beast in her battle group casts a spell, reduce the cost of the spell by 1. The cost of the spell cast by Tanith cannot be reduced to less than 1, and Rites of the Worm last for 1 turn. So, you know how we talked about how she had this, bleed magical attack, that sure, she could go and do this, but I mean, what? She's Fury 6, she's gonna do this, 3 times maybe, and that's if you're not boosting. Well, if it's on feet, she could be doing this up to 6 times. Or more importantly, she could be doing this 3 times, boosting the damage. So especially if she's in a spot where she's feeling okay that she can hit you, this can be very, very dangerous. So overall, just a warlock with many different avenues you can go down. And I guess it's one of those things we can say that probably the biggest thing that's going to be limiting her is the fact that there's a lot of spells that she's going to want to do, but she only has 6 Fury to deal with. So she can't exactly be doing everything all the time. All right, so with that in mind, let's go on to the next step, which is going to be talking about a potential list. Now, when I was going and thinking about a list, again, you can be taking these different ways. You can go a lot for, I'm going to go for the magical assassination. You can go for, I'm going to go with the admonition way and have, make sure that I have my beast that can be trying to avoid things. You can go for like the magical stuff for your beast as well, if you want to be doing spells with that type of a thing. But to me, I want to do something where I can really do a very hard attack attrition-wise and make it so that my opponent can't really come back. And for that, I really want to make sure I got in some Reeves of Ouroboros. So before I get too far, the theme I'm going to be putting this in is the Wild Hunt. So the nice things about putting it in the Wild Hunt is not only are you getting those things, but it says here that when a living war beast is forced to use its animus while in its controller's control range, reduce the cost of the animus of 1. So, hey, that's great. If you ever have some cool animuses, why not? But otherwise, even though we can also have some Wolf of Ouroboros doing an ambush, that's not really what we're looking to do here. Now, what I did with her battle group is, maybe I fell in for this, maybe this is not the best way to do it, but it turns out that Tanith actually has a signature war beast, and that is Loki. Now, what that means is that when you take Loki with Tanith, that it's also going to be having Prowl, so they can be hanging out around together in some forest, both having stealth while they're in that forest or cloud, and that's fantastic. It also has its little throwing hook. It can go out there, pull something in, then wail on it. And I was thinking to me that, sure, I'm taking this because it is, sure, her signature war beast, but I think it's going to be playing along a lot with what we want to do with this list anyway. With that though, with Circle, you are a little bit pillow-fisted. You need a way to be hitting harder, so I needed to have some way to get Primal in there. You could be going with the Gorax, but I decided to go with the Feral Warp Wolf, and that's just going to be because I kind of ran out of points. And the reason why I ran out of the points is because I'm going to be having a max unit of Reeves of Ouroboros with their UA. Now, the reason why I want them is that Affliction. This is going to be a 10-man unit with the UA as well, which is going to be having rate of fire 2 guns that are range 12. And so what this really means is that if my unit just wants to absolutely just unload on a heavy, well then the unit alone, not counting the UA, is going to be putting into it 20 shots, and then there'll be another 2 from the UA as well, because, that's one of those banners without a weapon. So 22 damage going into a heavy is probably going to cripple something, And because you're 12 inches away, you're probably at a spot where they can't really do anything back. So especially if you're doing something where putting rifts in front of them or something like that, that'd be fantastic. And you're just pinking them down. And again, this is only 25 points. They're only going to be having so many things. And so if they can jump in and just wipe out or cripple a heavy like this, you are way ahead. And of course, they could also be going after any units that are on the other side. They have combined range, so they could be doing those into any Archons or something like that you could be seeing as well. Just a really fantastic unit. Now, one thing to really mention here is that one of the things you can actually add as a requisition point is 3 Warwolves. However, that would break the FA1 rule, and for whatever reason, that's not one of the exceptions. If you look in the rules, there's some things you can break the FA1 rule of, and for whatever reason, they figured that no, Warwolves won't fit into that, so it's not really an option you can take. However, that's alright because there's some other great things you can take, like Lord of the Feast. So we're going to be throwing Lord of the Feast in there. I probably don't need to tell you why Lord of the Feast is good. Just, you know, going around there, killing lots of infantry, killing solos, sometimes killing casters. So, yeah, pretty legit. After all that, I'm left with 1 free point, so why not? I threw in a Swamp Gobber Chef because, sure, that's okay. So the main thing you're going to be doing with a list like this is that you're going to go out there, you're going to be having Admonition up onto Loki. Once you decide that it's time to try and engage, you're first going to be going in there with your Reeves of Oberos. If you can just pick things away from 12 inches away, why not take those free kills? Otherwise, when it's time to really trying to hit hard, well, you can go and make it so that with Loki, you can be warping for strength, you can be getting primal, you could be getting scything touch if you want as well, and really going in there and just destroying something. Hit it with your hook, pull it in, destroy. Meanwhile, the Reeves are going in there, crippling something else, and just getting way ahead. Now, one of the things you have to keep in mind is that you can't have Admonition and Scything Touch up at the same time. So you're going to have to decide whether you're going to be going offensive or defensive. But hey, you know, you could always be putting Scything Touch on something else, right? Put it on Lord of the Feast, put it on the Swamp Gobber Chef, whatever you want, and then it can go in there, apply the Scything Touch, and then you have the Admonition on Loki as well. So that even if it's going to go primaling and going frenzying next turn, at least it's not going to be killed, and then the following turn you can go and actually do something with it. So that's really the way that I would take this. Again, I think there's a lot of different ways you could go with Tanith. You could be trying to lean more into the magical side of things and going for that magical assassination. But I think it's something that you want to say is sure there and available, but not be leaning on. Go in for that aggressive attrition. And then if you ever see that opportunity, great, pop that feat, make everything cheaper, make everything an arc node for your battle group, and then spell away. So that's always something that's in your toolbox as well. So there you go. There's the list, but let's go and try and get to some of these grades. Now, the first thing that we're going to be grading is going to be its answers. So when you look at the card, how well does Tanith go out there and answer the skews and the different things you might be trying to be seeing out there? And the answer is that she does it amazingly well. If you want to be dealing with something that's high defense, well, she has her gun that's going to be lowering things by 3 defense. You have the Affliction, which is going to lower the things down by 2 more defense. So that's a swing of 5 defense. That's pretty awesome. Meanwhile, if you need to actually get through armor, not only does she have Scything Touch to lower that armor by 2, but she also has Affliction, which is just, I don't care what your armor is, plink, 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 you're dead. You know, you can think of a situation where you're up against an Archon that has some spell on it, so its armor is just through the roof with, you know, like maybe it's Striker 1 with Arcane Shield, and you're like, I don't care, just plink, 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 you're dead, goodbye, get off my board. So a very strong answer to that. Getting back to that gun as well, the very fact that you can say, hey, if there's something out there, some really strong solo or something like that that I just can't really deal with, I might be able to lock it down with my gun because I can shoot something beside it, or maybe just shoot it, get that AoE down, make it so that it's going to be then just shadow bound, and then yeah, because it does not have focus, it can't shake it, and so it's going to be stuck there next turn, just really rotating in place, meaning I can go and focus on the rest of the army. So I don't think so far we've gotten into the A's, but I would definitely say that when it comes to Tanith and having answers to the different things you might be seeing out there, I mean, I guess she doesn't also have some way of dispelling spells or something like that, but still, that's going to be leaving her at a very, very solid A-. So a great grade for having answers. Now, what about the other side? What about asking questions? How well does Tanith go on the table and say, well, if you don't have an answer to this, you're in big trouble? And I think she does fairly well there as well, right? The very first thing that comes to my mind is the idea where she has Admonition. So if you don't have a good way where you can be trading up on my heavies, this is going to be something very significantly in my favor. As long as I can make sure that I can go into you and take you out, well, there you go. I'm going to be going up because you can't take me out directly, and I'm just going to be getting the advantage here. So Admonition, very strong for this. The idea that they always have to be worried about their positioning so that that shadow bind might be coming up. The idea that even the rifts where they might be throwing that down and saying, well, you didn't have Pathfinder, so sucks to be you. I'm just going to go and lob this out there in front of you, and now I'll just shoot you, plink you down, and wait to kill you next turn type thing. So this is not, of course, going to be as high as her answers, but there are some nice things that are here on the card. So I'm going to be giving that one a B-. There's some very significant things on here that the opponent is going to have to be thinking about in one way or another. Even just like the spells of that whole feat that she has, right? You'd never really know when she's just going to say, well, let's go for it, pop that feat, everything's cheaper, and then blast, blast, blast. You might just lose your caster from that, or all of your important solos. So all the time, they're needing to be positioning carefully and wondering whenever that feat might be popped up. So really nice thing to have there, to always be keeping your opponent on the back foot and worried about these things. All right, the next thing we're going to be talking about, though, will not be good, and that is going to be the personal output. Well, I suppose part of this is okay, right? Obviously, the worst part of all of this is going to be her melee ability, which is pathetic, right? If you're ever into the spot where you're needing to be doing that melee, it's probably because things are horrendous. Meanwhile, her gun's okay. And as well, her spells can be okay, especially on that one feat turn. It's not going to be reliable turn after turn after turn. However, there is at least that one time where I can say I'm going to pop my feet, do lots of fancy things. Hell, you know, remember again, if you kill something with that gun, you can get to cast a free spell. So that's pretty great. But with all this, that's not going to be going the whole way through, right? If you get to the end of the game and you need Tanith to try and close this thing out, it's probably not going to happen. And so because of that, I think I'm going to go down further and say she's somewhere around like a C-. I'm almost even tempted to go to like a D+, but I really can't do that because that gun and that one-time super feat go, go, go is pretty solid. Now, the next thing we're going to be talking about is what's the grading for if this is a new player. If a brand new player came to me and said, Brian, I want to start playing Warmachine. I picked up this circle starter box and it has Tanith in there. Let's play some Brawlmachine. Am I going to be worried about this new player? And I think no, I think this is fantastic. For a new player, there's so many different things on the card that, like I kind of said with some other ones, it doesn't really matter what models they have. Tanith can do something with it. I don't care if all you have is a bunch of beasts, if you have a little bit of like range stuff in there, if you got some of the stone ones and you want to go with something like that, like magical feat way, there's going to be something she can do. I'd say like maybe the worst thing that could happen is if you just took a complete combat army, because she doesn't really do a lot for it. But at the same time, she could be like this super solo, still doing Admonition, still doing Scything Touch, and still doing these other things for like for lowering defense and stuff like that. So no matter what that new player buys, it's going to be useful. And I think it's also another thing too where it can be forgiving, right? Because you're playing in hordes and you can be transferring damage, because she says Prowl and she can be hiding in the forest and shooting her guns from the shadow and stuff like that, or popping feet and then just arc noding through whatever war beast you want. She's forgiving in that way too, which is a lot better for a positive experience for that new player. So I really like this here, and I'm going to be putting this as a nice solid B. It's, you know, it is a little bit complicated, and there is that worry that if somebody tries to do everything, they might get frustrated with that. But overall, I think this is a very solid choice for a new player. All right, what about an experienced player? If there is an experienced player saying, Malorian, I'm going to a tournament and I'm bringing Tanith, do I feel that is going to be the best thing to do? Well, again, I think we have to look back to how well she did for all of her answers. Really, no matter what you're trying to deal with in this competitive meta, if you have someone that has all of these answers and also is pretty high as well for asking questions, this is a caster that's going to do well. Now, I don't think it's going to dominate. This is not one where it's like, oh yeah, I bet you Tanith is going to win first place again, but it'd be definitely a very strong option. So I'm going to be leaving this one as a B as well. So overall, that's everything for Tanith the Feral Song. You know, there's other starter casters that I'm just really like, oh, it's not the best one, whether it's for the new player or for an experienced, or there's lots of problems. But really across the board, I just think that Tanith is a fantastic design for a warlock. Lots of interesting ways you can go. And as we kind of discussed, it doesn't really matter whether you're a new player or an experienced player. I feel that this is a really great choice. So if you're a circle player out there and you're getting into the game or getting into Brawlmachine, I really think that maybe you should be looking at that nice starter caster Tanith, because she's actually pretty good. So there you have it. That is going to be it for Brawler Bios. I really hope that you enjoyed this. We're going to keep on doing this every 2 weeks. Really at the very beginning here, at very least, going after all the starter casters, and then after that we'll be moving off to the other ones too. So if you ever have any feedback, or if you have any requests for the next ones you want to be seeing, please always be posting them down below. Let me know what your feedback is, and otherwise we'll catch you later. Bye.